When my younger sister announced that she was pregnant with my husband's child on my birthday, she thought I would go into a frenzy of shock. But what she didn't know was that I had been hiding a secret about my husband, one that wouldn't just make her regret everything, but would blow the entire party room apart. Before I continue the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit the like and subscribe buttons if you've ever been betrayed by a toxic family member. Trust me, the ending is more than worth the beginning. My name is Caitlin Miller. I'm 30 years old. Currently, I'm a surgeon at a major hospital in San Francisco. But my story doesn't begin there. I grew up in the suburbs of San Jose, in a 4-bedroom house with a white picket fence and a backyard full of lavender. My father, Henry Miller, managed a sporting goods store. My mother, Gianna, taught 3rd grade. To our neighbors, we were the picture-perfect family. But perfection isn't always fair. When I was 6, I realized that sisterhood doesn't always resemble fairy tales. My younger sister, Camilla, 2 years younger, was spoiled like a princess by our parents. She constantly took my things: the limited edition Barbie doll I got at 8, the denim dress I saved my allowance for a whole month to buy at 11, and even the necklace from Grandma, the only thing she left specifically to me when I was 13. But instead of stepping in, my parents would just say, "You're the older one. You should learn to share." They never made Camilla return what she took or even apologize. I learned to stay quiet. I believed that if I tried hard enough, if I was good and polite, one day I'd be seen too. But I was wrong. It wasn't until I turned 18 and left home to attend the University of California that I finally felt like I could breathe. No more comparisons, no more being overlooked while all attention turned to Camilla. I studied medicine with a fierce belief that I could help others, the kind of help my own family rarely gave me. During the summer of my sophomore year, I met Caleb. He was managing a bar near campus. At first, it was just casual conversation. But soon, we realized how much we had in common: a love for the outdoors, hiking, hidden caves. Caleb was the first person who made me feel heard, without me having to prove my worth. After graduation, I started working at a hospital in San Francisco. Caleb moved up with me. We rented a small apartment in the Richmond district, lived simply and happily. 6 months later, he proposed, under the stars on a Monterey beach. I said yes, without hesitation. We began planning our wedding, and that was when Camilla, whom I'd spent years keeping my distance from, suddenly stepped back into my life. At first, I thought it was just a sister curious about my new life. But what followed was far from simple. I don't know exactly when it all began, but I remember with absolute clarity the first moment I felt something off. Caleb started changing his phone password. Every time I asked to borrow his phone to check Google Maps or order food, he would snatch it back. "Let me do it, it's faster." I tried not to overthink. Maybe it was work stress. Maybe he was planning some surprise. But the unease began to seep into every quiet evening in the apartment that had once been our home. One day, as I was cleaning the car before taking it in for maintenance, I found a small silver earring beneath the back seat. Not mine, not even the kind I would wear. And the scent in the car? Too sweet, too sharp, a perfume that had never once been part of any date we'd shared. My hand trembled as I picked up the earring. My heart pounded, as if I were standing outside an operating room, not knowing whether the patient inside would survive. That night, I asked Caleb, "Whose is this?" He looked at me for exactly 2 seconds before laughing. "Probably some bar staff left it behind." "Come on, Kai, what are you thinking? You're overreacting." I smiled faintly too, slipping the earring into the pocket of my white coat, as if I were tucking a fresh wound into the drawer of my heart. I told myself, don't be the jealous older sister. Don't let old wounds rewrite the present. But that night, I called Maya, my best friend from college, now a family therapist, the only person who could see through me with just my voice. "What's wrong?" she asked the moment she picked up. "Maya, I feel like Caleb isn't here anymore. I mean, he's next to me, but he's not really there." "Do you have any proof?" Just a feeling, and a few small things. But you know what? I think I'm just reacting like a kid who's been overlooked. Maya hesitated for a moment, then softened her voice. Kai, you're a surgeon. You don't make decisions based on feelings. If you feel something's wrong, maybe it's because something really is. I didn't answer, staring out the window of the cafe at the rush of people passing by with their morning lattes. I suddenly felt like I was back in the operating room, where everything can unravel because of one small tear left unstitched. Weeks later, I tried pushing the unease aside, hoping my 30th birthday party might be a chance to reconnect. A milestone, a reason for Caleb to look at me the way he used to. And then my mother called. This year, come home for your birthday, okay? I'll make that chocolate cake you love. I hesitated. Since getting married, my mother and I rarely talked, but there was something in her voice that softened me, like that first time she taught me to stir cocoa on a winter morning, my tiny hands unable to melt the powder no matter how long I stirred. I agreed. I didn't know that this seemingly innocent invitation would become the prelude to the greatest betrayal of my life. I stepped into my parents' house and was immediately overwhelmed by the crowd. The living room was packed, voices echoing with laughter, the scent of lilies mingling with roast chicken filling the air. I had to squeeze past distant relatives, still stunned in my mind. Why is it so crowded? I asked my mother, my eyes quickly scanning the room full of unfamiliar faces. She smiled brightly, her voice light as if announcing a casual thing. I wanted your birthday to be special, darling. You're 30 now. I spotted Aunt Wendy, from all the way in Colorado, standing by the fireplace, martini in hand, chatting about travel. I asked again, You even invited Aunt Wendy? But Mom just brushed it off. Don't overreact. Everyone's here out of love for you. Love for me? But the eyes and laughter in this room were pulled elsewhere, toward Camilla. My sister stood there, in a fiery red dress, her wavy hair cascading as if she had just walked out of a photo shoot. Camilla told stories, laughed loudly, and made sure to gently rest her hand on Caleb's shoulder whenever she could. Relatives swarmed around her like bees to honey. And me? I felt like a guest who had wandered into my own party. I spotted Caleb standing near the window, a glass of wine in hand, his eyes never looking for me. I tried to blend in, smiled, nodded, took a glass of white wine from Mom. But I didn't feel present. Not really. When it came time to cut the cake, everyone sang happy birthday in unison. Some raised their phones to record. I bent down, blew out the candles, then looked up, searching for Caleb. He was still there, not singing, not clapping, his gaze lost in some unreachable space. And then, Camilla stood up. She grabbed the kid's toy microphone, her voice full of confidence. Kai, I have a special gift for you. Everyone turned to look. I froze, not sure if it was curiosity or dread. Camilla pulled out a piece of paper. I recognized it immediately as an ultrasound result. She held it up, smiling. I'm pregnant. 4 months. And the father is Caleb. I heard the sound of glass shattering somewhere. The room seemed to dim like someone had flipped a switch. A child started sobbing. My father stammered, Camilla, what are you saying? But Camilla didn't flinch. She smiled, emphasized, This is the result of love. I can't hide it anymore. You deserve to know. Caleb stood motionless, his hand gently tightening on her shoulder, his gaze avoiding mine as if I were a mirror he couldn't face. I stood still, both hands clutching the hem of my dress. And then Camilla continued, her voice cold as steel. You can't give him a family. You can't have children. Every word she said was like a cold needle, piercing straight into my chest. I looked around for support, but saw only my mother silently wiping the cake tray, and my father slumped into a chair, rubbing his forehead like he had just lost his breath. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I only felt cold. So cold it ached up my nose. And in that moment, my mind wasn't on Caleb or the baby. It was on the image of myself at 8 years old, standing behind the curtain, watching Camilla wear her brand new birthday dress, while I had to wear the hand-me-down from the year before. My mother used to say, "She's smaller, you have to give in to her." And now, at 30, I was still the one, yielding the light, yielding the love, and even the title. I stormed out of that house, walked straight into the darkness, and didn't look back. The San Jose night wind was bitterly cold, slicing through the thin fabric of my dress as if to strip away every last layer of defense I had left. I opened the car door, slipped inside, slammed it shut, and sat still for a moment, as if one more movement would cause me to shatter completely. The overhead light fell on my face in the rearview mirror, eyes dry but full of ruins, smudged lipstick, tangled hair, and the blank expression of someone who had just been betrayed by the two people closest to her. I stared into the mirror for a long time, then quietly opened the glove compartment and pulled out a gray folder. Inside was everything I hadn't wanted to believe, but had forced myself to prepare. Photos, receipts, recordings. I had once hoped I'd never need to use them. But the moment Camilla held up that ultrasound in front of everyone, every illusion was erased. I stepped out of the car, returned to the house that, just 30 minutes ago, I thought would be a place of celebration. This time, every step I took was steadier. I didn't walk in as a betrayed wife, but as someone who knew her worth and had every right to reclaim it. When I sat back down at the table, Camilla was still being comforted by my aunt, and Caleb stood with his hands behind his back, like a schoolboy searching for the answer to a wrong equation. I pulled out my chair, sat down as if nothing had happened, picked up a fork, cut a piece of birthday cake, and ate it. The whole room froze, stunned. They were waiting for me to break. But I didn't give them that performance. Camilla spoke first. "You're not going to say anything?" Her voice a mix of nervousness and challenge. I set the fork down, opened my purse, pulled out the envelope from the car, and calmly said, "I've known." For 6 months I pulled out the photos, Caleb and Camila kissing in the car, shopping together in a distant town, entering a hotel. The recordings, the receipts. I didn't need to shout or pound the table. Everything I needed was in those images. "I hired a private investigator," I said. "My friend, Maya, recommended him. Very reliable." Caleb stood frozen, while Camilla started to unravel. "You can't do this. I'm pregnant," she stammered, trying to hold on to any last bit of control. But I cut in. "The baby isn't Caleb's." The entire room went silent, as if the air had been sucked out. I pulled out another paper, Caleb's preconception health report. Congenital infertility. I looked directly at Camilla. Not with anger, not with sarcasm, just truth. I've known that for a year, but I never said anything, because I thought just having him was enough. I thought we'd adopt someday. I believed in a peaceful life. But turns out, I loved the wrong person. Caleb let go, stepped back, and then turned and walked away. Camilla panicked, chased after him, calling his name. My mother screamed, trying to hold them back, but it was too late. They left that house like two people who had just poured fire onto their own family. And me, I remained seated among a room full of silent people and took another bite of my birthday cake. It wasn't sweet anymore. But at least it was the only part of this party that truly belonged to me. After most of the guests had left, my mother still tried to get me to stay, her eyes frantic, as if the moment I stepped out the door, everything would truly collapse. But I gently pulled my hand from hers. Not out of anger, but because I was simply too tired. Tired of always being the one to keep things from falling apart, even as I was breaking from within. I drove to a small hotel near downtown, checked into a room on the 3rd floor, with no luggage, no backup clothes, just the birthday dress still marked with a dried smear of frosting. I stood alone in the bathroom under a cold shower, letting the water wash away my makeup, and with it all the words I hadn't managed to say during that family gathering. That whole night, I didn't cry. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. The streetlights filtered through the curtains, casting quiet streaks of light across the ceiling like scratches on an old film. I didn't know where to begin again. But one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't go back. The next morning, I woke early, ordered a black coffee from the lobby, then dialed Patricia, the divorce lawyer I had met with before. She picked up after a short ring. Her voice was steady, as if she'd been waiting. "I'm ready," I said. "No need for further explanation. We'll file today," she replied. Firm, clear. That afternoon, I returned to our shared apartment one last time to pack. I took nothing except what truly belonged to me: a few blouses, medical textbooks, childhood photos. I left behind everything Caleb had ever given me, including the silver necklace he secretly bought in Monterey during our first trip, the wine glasses etched with our names that I once thought we'd use forever, and the landscape painting he had commissioned after I lingered too long outside a tiny art shop in Sausalito. I had once seen those things as proof of love, of meaning, but now they were just artifacts of a mistake, not out of spite, but because I no longer wanted to carry anything born from a lie. I packed slowly, item by item, as if I were sealing off a chapter I'd written with full trust, even though the ink had been smudged from the start. When I left the apartment, I didn't cry. I paused briefly at the doorway, looked into the small kitchen where I'd cooked Caleb breakfast every weekend, then turned away, without looking back. That evening, I went in for my hospital shift, wore my white coat, tied my hair back, walked straight into the OR as if nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew something had broken. Not my heart. My trust. That night, as I was walking through the hospital lobby, Caleb appeared. He stood there under the cold fluorescent lights, hair disheveled, eyes red, hand to his forehead like a man on the verge of collapse. "Kai," he said, his voice catching. "I know I messed up. Please just give me a chance 1 minute." I froze, didn't turn. "Not here," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to cut through all his pleading. "I've lost everything, but the thing I fear most is losing you. Please, Kai, I don't know how to go on if you really walk away." I turned to face him. His face was hollow, his eyes wet, his lips pressed together as if trying to hold on to the last shred of dignity. But I simply shook my head, soft but final. "Caleb, this is a hospital. I'm working. You're making this worse. Please leave before I have security escort you out." He stood still, as if the last door had just slammed shut. I walked past him, not because I no longer felt anything, but because I had already heard enough. And now, I needed peace more than I needed an apology. That night, I didn't return to the hotel. I stayed in the on-call room, a small space with a single bed, the familiar scent of antiseptic and soft white light. I drank a cup of hot tea, reviewed the next morning's surgical schedule, then texted Maya. "The papers are filed. I'm okay." And truthfully, I was. Not because I hadn't been hurt, but because I had stopped trying to stay where I kept getting hurt. 2 days after the divorce papers were filed, Camilla called me. I was sitting in the on-call break room, still wearing my white coat, when my phone screen lit up, the familiar name appearing, no longer with a heart symbol, no longer tied to any sweet memory. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. On the other end was Camilla's voice, softer than I remembered, but still the voice of someone used to being forgiven. "I don't know where to begin. I'm sorry," she said. I said nothing. Not out of shock, but because I was angry. Angry enough not to waste words. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she continued. "Caleb was just there at the wrong time. I was weak. I was lonely. I made a mistake." I let out a laugh, a dry sound, scraping through my throat like a dull blade. "Lonely," I said. "And you solved that loneliness by climbing into bed with my husband?" Camilla went silent. I continued, "You're not weak, Jess. You knew exactly what you were doing. You always have. You're just used to never being held accountable." My voice was steady and cold. No need to raise it, because the truth doesn't need to be emphasized. "I didn't expect to get pregnant," she said, as if explaining. "I thought you couldn't have kids. I just thought—" "You thought what?" I cut her off. "That I'd what?" Be the godmother to your baby? Applaud you for getting all the attention, the child and the man who used to be my husband? There was a long pause. Then Camilla exhaled. I know I went too far, but I really do regret it. I gripped the phone tighter, my voice slowed but razor sharp. You don't regret doing it. You regret getting caught. I closed my eyes, and like a crack finally giving way, memories split open. I still remember the silver necklace with the blue stone Grandma gave me on my 13th birthday. She said, "It matches your eyes when you're sad." I loved that gift more than anything I'd ever owned. Kept it in a velvet box, hidden in my drawer, locked with a toy padlock. But just a week later, I saw it around Camilla's neck, spinning before the mirror, smiling with delight. You took it from me? I asked. Camilla shrugged. Just borrowing. I'll give it back. My mother called from the kitchen. Caitlin, you're the older one. Learn to share. No one, not a single person, asked if I was hurt. And, from that day on, Camilla learned something. She could take anything from me, even trust, and never have to return it. And now she was calling to apologize, asking for a chance to start over. But I was old enough to know there are some things that, once taken through betrayal, can never be placed back where they once were. No, I said quietly. I don't want to start over. I want to start differently, in a place where you no longer get to call what's mine ours. I hung up, didn't wait for her reply. In that small room, I sat for a few seconds, letting myself fully feel what was rising. Not anger, not forgiveness, but dignity. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to be the good big sister. I only had to be myself, whole, and belonging to no one. 3 days after the divorce papers were filed, my mother called. No questions about my health. No, "Are you tired?" like mothers usually ask their daughters after a long hospital shift. Just that same urgent, familiar tone, the one I had heard all throughout my childhood every time Camilla did something wrong and I was summoned to clean up the mess. She said, "Caitlin, I know you're angry, but you can't turn your back on family like this." I stood in the hospital corridor, hair clip still in my hand. "Turn my back?" I repeated. She continued, "Camilla is in crisis. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. You know, she's never been through something this difficult. She needs you." I tightened my grip on the strap of my bag, my voice calm, but inside me a familiar rage stirred, the kind I had suppressed my entire life. I said, "Mom, I just lost my husband. I was betrayed by my own sister, in front of the entire family. And now you're calling me just to ask me to help the one who destroyed everything I had?" Mom hesitated for a second, then fell back on an old reflex. "I'm not saying you're wrong, but Camilla is blood. Blood doesn't abandon blood." I took a deep breath, looking out the hallway window. "Do you remember when I was in 12th grade? Senior prom?" She replied slowly, "I remember." "Why?" I said. "I spent the whole summer working at the bakery, saving every cent to buy that navy blue dress, the one I dreamed about for an entire year. I had it ready in the closet, waiting for that night. And when I came home from my shift, Camilla was wearing it. Wearing it, with my date, to the prom." My voice didn't rise or tremble, just a scar being reopened. "Do you remember what you said that night? Do you?" Mom sighed, then answered quietly, I said Camilla didn't have a nice dress, and you had too. I thought you'd understand." I closed my eyes. "That was when I was 17, Mom. Now, I'm 30. I held the phone close, my voice slowing, but each word sharper than the last. Camilla didn't become this way on her own. She was allowed to take whatever she wanted without asking. She was protected, encouraged to believe she was special, and that her sister should always step aside. And you and Dad, taught her that, all throughout our childhood. And now, when the consequences come crashing down, you call me, the one who's carried the weight for 30 years, to carry it again?" There was a long silence on the other end. I thought she might have hung up. But then, for the first time in my life, I heard my mother whisper, "I'm sorry." Those 3 words didn't soothe me, but at the very least, they told me she had started to look at what she'd always turned away from. I stood still beneath the white lights of the ICU hallway, where hundreds of patients needed me. But right now, the one who needed saving was myself. I said, "I won't come. I won't call. And I won't carry someone else's consequences on my shoulders, ever again." My mother spoke again, this time as if releasing something. "Caitlin, you're still my daughter." I nodded, though she couldn't see, and replied, steady and unmoving, "And from today on, I'm still your daughter. But I'm no longer the one who suffers for others." I ended the call. Not out of anger, but because for the first time in my life, I knew how to protect myself from the very people who called themselves family. I signed the lease for my new apartment on a morning that felt like any other. It was a small place, just a few blocks from the hospital, with enough sunlight to grow a little flower pot on the windowsill. I didn't bring much, mostly books, medical files, and a few old photos where no one but me appeared. Life slowly simplified. I began waking up earlier, eating properly, taking on more complex surgeries, and feeling like I was being used for something meaningful, no longer defined by the roles of wife or older sister. One afternoon, while I was taking notes in the on-call room, an email from Camilla popped up. No subject line, no greeting, just a few short lines and an attachment. She said Caleb was now seeing a new employee at the bar, a young girl, possibly a college student, very sweet and into indie music. I opened the attached photo. Caleb sitting close to the girl, his hand resting lightly behind her back, smiling a smile that felt half familiar, half foreign. I wasn't surprised, just a soft sensation, like a breeze brushing over a scar that had already scabbed. I hadn't lost him to Camilla. I lost him to a kind of person, a person who needed someone else to feel valuable, even if only for a few months. A few hours later, a voice message from Camilla arrived on my phone. Her voice was hoarse, broken, as if struggling to hold back tears. "I know for sure you don't want to hear anything from me, but I can't not say this. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Everything went too far, and I didn't think it would end up this way. I didn't think Caleb would turn out like that either. I was wrong to interfere in your life. I regret it. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt you. The last person in the world I should have done that to. I just wish, if possible, we could talk again, as sisters. Not to fix everything. I know we can't. Just, I miss you. I miss how things used to feel. If you hear this message, please consider replying. Just once is enough." I listened to all of it, every word, every fractured breath between the lines. But I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't forgiven her, but because I understood. Some connections, once severed by the blade of betrayal, can never return to their original shape. I was still angry, but beneath that anger, there was freedom. A kind of lightness that didn't need to win, didn't need revenge, didn't need any more words. The following week, the divorce was finalized. Caleb accepted all the terms of our prenuptial agreement. No asset disputes, no legal battles. Everything went quietly through the lawyers, no face-to-face meetings. I kept everything in my name, including our shared savings, and owed nothing except a few old memories. As I stepped out of the law office, I didn't cry. I simply adjusted the collar of my blouse and smiled softly, as if, at last, I had reclaimed the authorship of my own story. I heard the news that Camilla had given birth on a drizzly afternoon while I was sitting down to write a report after a 6-hour surgery. A young colleague handed me a card from the front desk. Not a phone call. Not an email. A handwritten letter. Cream-colored paper, the handwriting careful, as if each word had been weighed before it was written. Along with it was a photo, a small baby girl, round cheeks, dark brown hair and blue eyes, the exact shade of mine. On the back of the photo was a line. Her name is Lisa. I don't plan to find her father. I want to start over. I read the letter in the on-call room, where only the hum of the air conditioner and the soft yellow lights kept me company. Camilla didn't offer many excuses. Instead, she wrote about sleepless nights, about Lisa's first cry, about changing her first diaper while shaking and crying herself. And then, one paragraph, more honest than anything I'd heard from my sister in 30 years. I used to envy you for everything. Your grades, your calmness, the way Mom and Dad looked when they talked about you. I hated being in the shadow. I couldn't understand how you stayed quiet and still got loved. I never thought I'd apologize, but now I understand. And I hope, when you see Lisa, you won't see me, but a different chance. I didn't reply right away, but I kept the letter in my wallet, and a few weeks later, I drove to the apartment where Camilla lived. No warning, no flowers or gifts, just me, in a long coat, standing at the door, knocking 3 times. Camilla opened the door, tired, pale, but with eyes that seemed strangely lighter. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just looked at each other, for the first time, without the weight of childhood or the expectations of family between us. Lisa was sleeping, her breath soft and steady in the crib beside the wall. I looked at the baby for a long time, saying nothing. The following week, I agreed to be Lisa's godmother, not because I had forgiven, but because I believed, if there was anything truly worth starting over for, it was a life that hadn't yet known lies or rivalry. I placed my hand gently on her soft head and made a silent promise. I would not let the worn-out cycles of this family repeat themselves again. After Lisa was born, nothing could be swept under the family rug anymore. Relatives began voicing things they had only dared think before. Aunt Clara, for the first time in decades, spoke directly to my mother. "Gianna, I used to think your strictness came from love. But now, I wonder if Caitlin has endured more than you realized." Another uncle, usually reserved, sighed over dinner. "If it were my daughter, I don't know if I'd have the strength to stand like Caitlin did." These weren't words meant to accuse, but to finally name the emptiness our family had pretended not to see for 30 years. My mother didn't respond at first. She simply sat in silence, twisting her fingers out of old habit. But one afternoon, when it was just the two of us in the kitchen, she looked at me for a long time and finally spoke, not in her usual instructive tone, but in a low, raw voice I had never heard before. "I was wrong, Caitlin. I let you carry the weight of comparisons, of being overlooked just because you never asked for more. You made it too easy for me, and I took sides without realizing. For so long, I forgot that you too needed to be loved like a child." I didn't respond, but I nodded. Not as an instant act of forgiveness, but because I knew it had taken 30 years for those words to reach her lips. And sometimes, the first step toward healing is just that. An adult brave enough to recognize that hurt doesn't come from a single moment, but from a way of raising a child. As the family began rearranging its fractured pieces, I began rebuilding myself. Not as someone's daughter or someone's wife, but as a chief surgeon, trusted by colleagues and loved by patients. I was promoted that spring, during a short meeting that, for the first time, made me feel like I didn't have to ask permission to shine. A few men came into my life during that time: a slow, smiling orthopedic surgeon, an anesthesiologist who made jokes in the elevator, and a professor who once taught me in my first year. They were all kind, but whenever a relationship neared a certain depth, I'd take a step back. Not out of fear, but because I wasn't ready for anyone to enter the silence I had just rebuilt. A space where I could be free, could be comfortably alone, could exist without the automatic need to share my thoughts, my space, or my sleep. The last news I heard about Caleb came through a short message from an old friend. He'd been fired. The reason? Inappropriate behavior with a new female employee. No one had to say more. I simply looked at the screen, closed my eyes for a beat, and exhaled. Not because he had paid a price, but because I hadn't gone back, hadn't stumbled again, and no longer felt regret for what I'd lost, because clearly, there are some things that, if kept, would have been the real damage. I spent my 30th birthday in Hawaii, alone. No birthday cake, no happy birthday song, just the quiet rhythm of waves brushing against powdery white sand, and a simple dinner I ordered for myself: fresh sashimi, a glass of white wine, and a toasted coconut tart I'd never tried but chose because its name sounded sweet. I left my phone in the hotel room. No one called. And strangely enough, I wasn't waiting for anyone to. I walked along the beach at dusk, barefoot on warm sand, holding my slip-ons like a child sneaking away from her mother. I didn't think about Camilla, didn't think about Caleb, didn't think about any apologies still owed or any love I once longed for. Instead, I thought about myself, as I am now. A woman who knows that forgiveness is a choice, not a duty. That family, if it can't be a place of healing, has no right to become a blade that cuts again and again. And that my worth doesn't lie in who chooses me, who stays with me, or who has left me, but in how I choose to live with the truth, how I choose to heal without losing my dignity. A group of local children ran up to me, inviting me to build sandcastles with them. At first, I shook my head, but then I sat down. Sand clung to my knees, my hair was tangled by the sea breeze, and my heart felt as light as the plastic bucket a little girl handed me to fill the castle mold. We didn't talk much. We just laughed, cheering as each part of the castle took shape beneath tiny hands. A passerby snapped a photo. Me, sitting among the kids, eyes gently closed, wearing a smile that had nothing to prove. I keep that photo in my wallet, not to show off, but to remind myself, there are days when you don't need anyone to confirm how strong you've been. You just need to know you made it through, without losing the softness of your own heart. Thank you for listening to my story, and I'd be truly grateful if you hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video.